Good morning. I'm Ward 1 Councilmember Brianne Nadeau, the Chair of the Committee on Public Works and Operations. Today is Thursday, October 19th, 2023. The time is 9:36 a.m. I'm calling to order this meeting of the committee to conduct a public hearing on three pieces of legislation. The first bill under consideration is Bill 25-182, the Taking Rubbish Away from Small Homes Amendment Act of 2023. Bill 25-182 was introduced by Councilmember Henderson on March 2nd, 2023. Its stated purpose is to grant small condominium buildings with 8 or fewer units eligibility for residential solid waste management services from the district. Under current law, DPW only provides solid waste management services to residential buildings containing 3 or fewer units. Bill would also require the chief financial officer to undertake a study of the solid waste tax credit deduction issued to the owners of condominium living units or homeowners who pay for commercial and solid waste collection services. The second bill under consideration is Bill 25-132, the requirement to provide notice of intent to remove public litter containers Amendment Act of 2023, which was introduced by Councilmember Louis George on February 8th, 2023. As introduced, B 25-132 would establish notice requirements for the Department of Public Works before the removal of public litter containers. Specifically, it would require DPW to give 30 days written notice of the agency's intent to remove a public litter container from a public right-of-way, including a justification for the removal to the OANC, each affected commission, and the commissioners representing any single member district affected by the removal. The final bill under consideration during today's hearing is Bill 25-412. It was introduced on June 30th, 2023 by Chairman Mendelson at the request of the mayor. The bill would amend DC official code to provide the Department of Public Works the ability to serve a party cited for an infraction of the Litter Control Administration Act of 1985 with a notice of violation via first-class mail. It would also provide that when such service is by first-class mail, 5 additional days must be added to the time period within which the party cited may or is required to take any action specified in the NOV. It also clarifies that a residential premises may be inspected and investigated for an alleged nuisance. I look forward to hearing from our public and government witnesses today on each of these measures. I'll now turn to at-large Councilmember Christina Henderson for her opening remarks.
Thank you, Councilmember Nadeau, and good morning to everyone. I appreciate you holding this hearing today. I introduced the Trash Act to address some of the equity gaps that district homeowners face in the benefits afforded to people who live in larger homes versus smaller homes. In most cities, as Councilmember Nadeau sort of mentioned, all residents who receive solid waste collection and disposal services pay a fee to the jurisdiction for those services. Here, those services are provided free of charge to single-family homes and residential buildings with 3 or fewer units. People who live in larger multifamily buildings have to pay a private hauler for those same services out of pocket. To offset the costs, the Office of the Chief Financial Officer issues a tax credit to those homeowners. The tax credit was set at $60 in 1992 and has been adjusted annually according to the increase in the Consumer Price Index. This year, the trash credit value is only $125. Residents who have to pay for private trash and recycling hauling have reported rising contract costs, so that the tax credit no longer has its intended effect of offsetting or leveling the field between single-family homeowners, condominium, and cooperative homeowners. Multifamily homeowners are demonstrably disadvantaged by this arrangement. I raised these concerns with the former interim director of DPW, Michael Carter, who was a 25-year veteran of municipal government across multiple jurisdictions. Mr. Carter shared that the district's administrative processes for waste management are unusual, and we suggested looking at a different model. This legislation would ask DPW to reimagine its service delivery model, and that is neither a small nor easy task. I know adjusting the model in any way will take work, and I appreciate the agency's willingness to be here today to talk about their core services and to discuss how we can work together to better serve the residents with more quality services so that the quality service that so many have come to expect. I appreciate the public witnesses for being here today, and I look forward to the conversation. Thank you, Councilmember Nadeau.
Thank you, Councilmember Henderson. Just some logistical announcements for today's hearing. It's being live streamed. at briannecanedo.com/live. We're asking witnesses to stick to their allotted time, 5 minutes for those speaking on behalf of an organization, and 3 for all other witnesses. We do have a Zoom webinar format for our public witnesses today. When it is your turn, we will be inviting you to be promoted to the panel. Until that time, you will not have access to your camera or your microphone. Okay, so we are now going to call on our public witnesses. And just note, for any technical difficulties, you can send a message to either to the DC Council Committee or on Public Works, or Sabrine, Katie, who is in the Zoom right now, or email publicworks@dccouncil.gov. Okay. Our first panel is Commissioner Santiago Lakatos, ANC 1B, Commissioner Joe Bishop Henchman, 5F06, Commissioner Aaron Palmer, 4B, Zach Israel, Commissioner Kim Patterson, 4A05, Paula Edwards, Alicia Hammond, Laura Hicks, and AJ Amanco. We will begin with Commissioner Lakatos.
Thank you. And good morning, Chairperson Nadeau and Councilmember Henderson, any other members of the committee tuning in. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today and for introducing this legislation. My name is Santiago Lakatos. I'm an ANC commissioner representing the U Street Corridor. I'm testifying today strongly in support of the 3 bills before the committee because the trash and litter situation, and unfortunately DPW's response, is failing to meet the needs of our communities. This is especially the case when it comes to littering and trash in my community, which gets a lot of excess litter from nightlife patrons and visitors to the area, but doesn't have anywhere near the amount of public litter cans needed to address it. So in addition to one of the bills in front of us, which is addressing the future removals with a requirement for an NOI, I feel like the council and DPW need to work a little bit longer term to find a solution that address both the need for more cans as well as addressing the past removals, i.e. evaluating whether those removals were justified and need to be returned, whether those cans need to be returned. I recognize it's probably a broader conversation, but when it comes to the bills in front of us today, I would specifically recommend the following. So including a provision to require DPW to account for those past removed cans and offer potentially an expedited process to return them when requested, separate from the current process that requires sort of the 311, the whole process. So I'll talk about that a little bit more. And specifically, I've documented a couple of instances where there were cans removed, residents requested a can be reinstalled, DPW evaluated the request and then just came back with no litter can needed, even though there was one there before. Additionally, requiring DPW's criteria for their litter can wait list to be published and to be clear, requiring they provide an explanation for the denials of the can aside from just no litter can needed. And then additionally, this is especially applicable for the U Street corridor and also other major nightlife corridors, which is requiring them to revise their criteria for the installation of cans to expand the eligibility to adjust for the realities of mixed use neighborhoods where residential area isn't always the same thing. It might be one block off of an arterial, but it actually experiences a lot of litter. And so as kind of I was talking about prior, we are addressing part of this problem with these bills, but I think when we're talking about the broader problem of the lack of bins and the hurdles to prevent those, I wanted to share a bit of the experiences that I myself and some of my neighbors have had with this process to kind of, I think, inform this conversation. So this year, after following the very bureaucratic and at times frustrating process that DPW created to request new cans, they denied a lot of eligible requests right at the very end of the fiscal year with the message, no litter can needed. And you can imagine how frustrating it is for myself, for people who spend a lot of time and effort contacting their commissioner, figuring out who it was, doing all this stuff just because they wanted to get a trash can, only to just get that response. So I'll provide 2 examples, although I will include more specific service requests in my written testimony. So at the intersection of 13th and T Street, right off of U Street, DPW removed a litter can in front of the Whitelaw Market sometime after 2020. This location gets a lot of late night pedestrian traffic, a lot of people who go out and they might have some food, they're walking back to their cars, they're walking back to their neighborhoods. There's a lot of litter there. DPW's response, no litter can needed. Another example, the 2500 block of Sherman Avenue, very long block, around a quarter mile. A lot of visitors who park there. It's a all-time parking zone. There's a lot of litter that gets left behind, and while I wish people wouldn't litter and take it to their cars or walk a little farther, which I do, the reality is we do need to provide options for people to throw that litter away. So, for example, I got very frustrated with this litter buildup. Over the course of 2 hours, myself and another Commissioner Josh Jacobson, collected, I believe, around 5 large trash bags worth of litter on the western side of the block. We requested a litter can. We passed an ANC resolution. What response did we get? No litter can needed. And I would add, as a final note, that I really do appreciate the expanded focus on trash pickup to multifamily residences. Anecdotally, my understanding of some instances is that illegal dumping in some of the litter cans that have gotten removed came from buildings where they didn't provide bulk item pickup or sufficient residential trash pickup. So then people felt forced that they had to dump it at the public can, where then DPW would pick it up. And so we really have to address those root causes on top of enforcement and adding new litter cans. Thank you for your time and the opportunity to testify. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Sorry, that's going to take me a little practice. Thank you for your testimony, and we'll definitely talk about that more in our round of questions. Commissioner Bishop Henchman.
Good morning. Thank you, Chairperson Nadeau and members of the committee. My name is Joe Bishop Henchman, and I'm the ANC for 5F06 in Eckington, and I'm chair of the 5F Commission. And I support all 3 bills, but I'm speaking primarily about the second bill. My district, 5F06, half of the southern half's in the NOMA bid district, which has plentiful litter cans provided by the bid, and then the northern half is outside of the district. Once upon a time, 6 years ago, my husband and I moved from the southern part of that area of the neighborhood to the northern part. And at that time, there was a litter can literally every block down 4th Street Northeast. But year by year, one by one, we've seen those cans removed by DPW. And until very recently, when we got one of them back, you could walk 7 blocks from Rhode Island Avenue to the MBT, W Street, V Street, U Street, Todd, T, Seton, S, and encounter just one litter can. And as those litter cans disappeared, I don't know, maybe DPW thought the litter would disappear too, but it didn't. It ended up on the ground. And in Eckington, we're trying to do our part. We've got every couple of weeks, Eckington Parks and Arts and Eckington Civic Association do neighborhood cleanups. The ANC helps out. We've got the clean team, and probably most problematic, I think, all over Eckington, neighbors are putting their own trash cans out in public space areas because of the lack of DPW litter cans. So, we're doing everything we can, but we do need help from the council and from DPW. DPW had new leadership installed this year. And as I mentioned, we've seen 2 litter cans come back and 2 others installed. I've been told the policy is no longer that removals happen because someone puts in a 311 request about an overflowing can, and an inspector comes out and decides it's being abused, which is the term that they told me, and fixes it by removing the can completely. I'm told removals are no longer the rule and installations are no longer the exception. And I've been told it's now policy that ANCs are alerted on installation and removal requests. And if all that's true, then everyone should support this bill because it should be current policy as of this year. On the ground, though, I'm worried that it's still not quite there yet in terms of the DPW actually following this policy. So, for example, ANC 5F asked for 8 installations earlier this year. We tried to do the work for DPW where we rank them in order of priority because we know resources are not unlimited. Each of our requests was near a commercial business or near a school or near a bus stop, and all of them are in high trash areas. Our number 1 priority is where a neighbor has currently had to put out their own trash can. It's between 2 businesses, it's next to a bus stop, and it's where a can was removed in recent years. And yet, DPW closed the request. Can not needed. Farther up on 4th and Rhode Island Avenue, a litter can disappeared just this past spring. And I've read DPW's testimony they provided yesterday saying they didn't remove any litter cans in fiscal year 23. Well, they removed this one, and no notice was given to the ANC or the commission or the commissioner. And our 311 request to reinstall it was closed out. Can not needed. This can be a win-win situation. I hope you'll pass this bill. You know, the goal of DPW, I think their mission is a clean city. And I don't know how you get a clean city without litter cans being wherever high trash areas are observed. I do have 3 suggestions for further action or amendments or at least consideration in the future. First, commit to more litter cans generally, especially in mixed use areas, and empty them more frequently than once or twice a week. I think the bids do it daily. And there's a tacit requirement, I think, in DPW's waitlist criteria that it can only go on arterials. That should be discarded. Trash is not restricted to arterials. Second, the criteria for getting on the waitlist for installations should be published, clear, and objective. I hear different things from different DPW officials on what they're looking for installations. What does it take to not have that have it come back cannot needed? I should note also that this criteria is a policy decision, not an administrative decision. So it should be you, the council, deciding what that criteria is. And might I suggest one of the criteria should be, is there litter on the ground? I don't even think that's a criteria right now. And third, echoing something Commissioner Lakatos said, DPW should be required to explain installation denials. Can not needed is all they say now, and including in the situations above where it's demonstrably untrue. The can was needed. We're all adults, we're all on the same team, we can take no, and explanations will make this process seem less arbitrary and unexplained. Again, happy to answer questions and happy to take anyone on a tour of trash parts of Eckington, trash on the ground in Eckington. Thank you.
Got to work on that closing. Trash. Eckington's a beautiful place. Okay, so we're gonna go to Commissioner Palmer, and we'll talk more, Commissioner Bishop Henchman.
Great. Thank you so much, Councilmember Nadeau, as well as the other committee members and staff for taking time to hear from the public as you consider proposed legislation regarding trash collection and public trash cans. My name is Erin Palmer. I'm a resident of Ward 4, Advisory Neighborhood Commissioner for Single Member District 4B02 in Tacoma, and Vice Chair of Advisory Neighborhood Commission 4B. As a commissioner, I've worked over several years to address issues related to littering, overflowing trash cans, and missed trash collection. I am testifying today specifically to provide a history of the commission's work with regard to these issues. Public trash cans and trash collection are important public services for residents in the district. Studies have shown that when the number of public trash cans are decreased, litter and time spent collecting litter increases. The presence of litter can increase the likelihood that more people will litter. The removal of public trash cans and increased neighborhood litter has many negative effects, including attracting rodents, cockroaches, and other pests, harming ecological health, creating tripping and other hazards, reducing resident physical activities and use of outdoor space, and increasing fear, perceived risk, and actual crime. In some cities, studies have shown that disparities in public trash can availability may be an effect of structural income-related disparities. In the district around May 2022, residents began noticing the removal of public trash cans in various locations. Reports of missing public trash cans noted their sudden disappearance and questioned whether they were being stolen. Informal discussions among ANCs and residents indicated the removal of dozens of public trash cans or possibly more, signaling a systematic removal of these cans. The Department of Public Works has indicated that public trash cans are removed for, quote, abuse or, quote, misuse, where residents place household trash bags in public trash cans. According to email communications from the department, their sweep team issues fines in these instances where they can determine who is using the can, and then the cans can be removed. In emails to ANCs, the department stated, quote, historically, we have had a very informal process for the removal and installation of litter cans and a very broken communication process from the resident to you and to us, end quote. The department has repeatedly referenced a tour of public trash cans and an assessment of public trash can collection service, but has not provided either to our commission despite past requests. ANC4B has observed challenges with regard to trash and recycling services and collection for residential buildings with 4 or more units, the lack of certain services, including bulk collection, as well as the lack of enforcement for services that property owners should provide, including trash and recycling collection, has created a system that substantially favors homeowners in single-family homes. The tax credit provided to owners of multifamily residences does not approach the true cost of providing these services in a free market, which contributes to cost cutting and service providers by multi-unit property managers. These challenges also appear to contribute to public dumping and what the department has characterized as abuse or misuse of public trash cans for household trash. In addition, commissioners and residents regularly submit 311 requests for overflowing public trash cans and recycling cans. When the department does not regularly collect from public cans, they overflow and residents complain. The department has stated that they aim to collect from public cans daily. That appears not to be the reality. The department's past practice of removing public trash cans without notice appears to have been in response, at least in part, to its own collection deficiencies. ANC4B has repeatedly stated its opposition to the removal of public trash cans and the need for expanded trash collection. I'm attaching 3 past resolutions and 3 past letters on these issues. ANC4B considers public trash cans and collection from these cans an essential public service. The Commission reiterates its call for efforts to improve and expand public trash cans and trash collection services. The Commission strongly opposes the removal of public trash cans, as removal does not serve the stated end of reducing litter, but rather deprives the community of a needed service. Furthermore, the removal of public trash cans due to so-called abuse or misuse by placing household trash in a can merely shifts dumping to even less preferable locations. At root, placing trash in a trash can is preferable to dumping in other private or public spaces. The Department of Public Works may have a preference for household trash to be placed in household collection receptacles and can work toward that goal, but punishing whole communities for the act of placing trash in a trash can is misinformed. While ANC4B is appreciative of efforts to require notice to ANCs for the removal of trash cans, the Commission calls for a stronger collection protocol that renders removal unnecessary and a higher and more detailed standard to justify removal of a public trash can, recognizing that the notice and standard required in the current proposed legislation is easy to meet and unlikely to stop the removal. If public trash cans are overburdened, the Commission requests additional cans and more frequent collection and not their removal. The district needs more public trash cans, more frequent collection, and expanded services for residents not already served through the district's collections. In my written testimony, I provide some more detail and attach all these resolutions. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Commissioner. We'll now hear from Zach Israel.
Hi, Chair Nadeau. Thank you for holding this important hearing. My testimony will be focused on Bill 25-132, which was introduced by Councilmember Louis George, and I wholeheartedly support that. I am a former advisory neighborhood commissioner on ANC4D in 2021 and 2022, and I have some direct experience on this issue, which compelled me to want to testify on this. So I'll just start. Deputy Director Crispino's submitted testimony on B25132 simply runs counter to the lived experiences that numerous commissioners and residents have experienced with regard to public litter cans being removed without notice by DPW and the corresponding process to request the reinstallation of these cans at the same locations. Mr. Crispino states in his testimony that, quote, since there is already a notification process for the removal of public litter cans, we do not have a specific position on Bill 25-132 and believe that the bill is therefore probably unnecessary. However, the notification process claimed to be in effect currently by DPW is not working, and this legislation is absolutely needed. So the council needs to move on and pass this with some tweaks that I'll mention later in my testimony. My own personal experience with this, so in August of 2022, DPW removed 2 public litter cans located immediately adjacent to Truesdale Elementary School, located in my single-member district at the time. I was alerted to the removal by a constituent who was perplexed that these cans were removed for no reason at all. I then contacted DPW numerous times to inquire as to why they were removed, and after several emails, finally received one that actually wouldn't acknowledge on the record that DPW was the agency that removed these litter cans. I then submitted a FOIA request to the agency requesting a full list of all public litter cans removed by the agency between January and September of 2022. And the response I received was missing many crucial details, was incomplete, and actually contained factual inaccuracies of locations that were in different wards they claimed to be in. I then reached out again to the then community liaison, who's no longer there, Celeste Duffy, to engage in follow-up, but never received a response from her. Fast forward to March of 2023, I resubmitted 2 separate 311 service requests to DPW requesting the installation of litter cans at the 2 original locations next to Truesdale. The agency then proceeded to close out one of these requests on September 27th of this year, claiming, quote, work completed, completed can was placed. I live a block away from the location. I walk over there. Shockingly, there's no can there. 2 days later, DPW closed the other service request, claiming that, quote, no more cans needed at location, which you heard from Commissioner Bishop Henchman. I confirmed with the current commissioner for the area, Carson Lucarelli from 4003, that he was never contacted by DPW about these 2 service requests before or after I submitted them and closed out by DPW without any action. Commissioner Lucarelli then reached out to DPW to inquire why DPW closed out these requests without any action, but still has yet to hear back from the agency. This is simply unacceptable. Elected volunteer commissioners and residents deserve better than to be treated by DPW in this fashion. There's 3 tweaks I'll just quickly mention to the legislation I think would improve it. Change language in section 2 to explicitly indicate that all individual commissioners receive the 30 days written notice from DPW. Number 2, add language that explicitly states that DPW is required to grant quote unquote great weight to a commission with regard to a proposed decision to remove a public litter can. And number 3, add language that requires DPW to publicly disclose to each impacted commission a list of all public litter cans removed in a commission's geographic area going back to fiscal year 2022 with a reason listed as to why the cans were removed. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much for your testimony. We'll now hear from Commissioner Kim Patterson. Make sure to unmute yourself, Commissioner.
Yes. Hi, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'm Commissioner Kim Patterson. I am in Ward 4. I'm 4A05, and I represent Brightwood. I want to thank the council members and the committee for this hearing. It's very important, as my fellow ANCs have stated, and I'm so happy that I normally feel like I'm on an island dealing with missing trash cans, but I am not. So I really appreciate my fellow ANCs and their comments. So I have requested trash cans on the 6200 block of Georgia Avenue, which is between Sheridan Street and Rittenhouse. The entire block is commercial. My constituents have requested, Kim, can you please get trash cans? There's 2 bus stops. We have nowhere to put our trash. There's businesses here. There's literally nowhere to put our trash. I have requested trash cans twice, and I also have been rejected with a statement from DPW stating no trash cans needed. Literally across the street on the odd side of Georgia Avenue, the odd numbered side of the 6200 block of Georgia Avenue, there are multiple trash cans, probably 4, but on the even side where I represent, 6200 block of Georgia Avenue, 0. And it is extremely frustrating. The trash just piles up, and it is a rodent problem. It's a trashy look to Georgia Avenue. It devalues property values, and my constituents are extremely annoyed, and so am I. Now, in the past, there was an Upper Georgia Avenue clean team in existence. I believe it was through Emory Beacon Church. I have heard that that is no longer the case, and I really haven't seen the employees there removing trash. They used to, and they would have to stuff it in one trash can on a block away. It was not effective. Unfortunately, I have heard that that contract has disappeared. I am not sure. I'm trying to get answers. But even if the contractors were there, there's still nowhere for them to put the trash that they collect unless they haul it down the way and put it in another trash can that is already full. So I definitely would like to see our trash cans back on our streets, especially on our main strips like Georgia Avenue. I did a walkthrough not too long ago with MPD, and I brought up this issue, and I was told that in the past, many years ago, when there was a crack epidemic in Washington, D.C., that trash cans were removed because they were a dropping point for drug dealers. Don't know if this is true. I have grown up in DC. I kind of remember all that happening, but now we're at a new day. We're not in a crack epidemic. And I would like the trash cans replaced. And I'm just hoping that that is not the reason why the trash cans are disappearing. I'm not sure because DPW does not give us a reason. They just say no trash cans approved. Moving on to another issue. In Ward 2, in front of the Whole Foods on P Street, 14th and P, there are wonderful trash cans there. There are the big belly trash cans. They seem to be solar. They open when you press your foot down. They are rat proof. They have some type of technology that they can alert DPW that the trash can is full and the trash can is then empty, I assume. Traveling throughout the United States, I have seen these trash cans in major cities, but not in Washington, D.C. The website is bigbelly.com. They have trash cans. They have a map of the entire country. They're everywhere. I don't know why they're only seem to be in one area of Logan Circle. I am requesting that these trash cans are put throughout the city. I have reached out to DPW with this request. I get nothing. I get no comment. I think maybe a year ago, I did get a comment that said, this is a pilot program, but that's it. I request and I request for these trash cans. I get no response, and it's extremely frustrating. And these trash cans will resolve a lot of issues, the big belly trash cans, because again, rat proof, you don't even have to touch them. They're very clean. You put your foot on the bottom, you open up, you can put your garbage in. They're not big enough that you can put household garbage bags in. They're just the right size for street trash. So I'm requesting that Washington, D.C. invest in this type of trash can. Also, the trash cans that we have now, they're not picked up on a regular basis in Brightwood, and I'm sure throughout the city. There should be a 24-hour pickup. These trash cans that are open air trash cans that rats feed in. Trash can be dumped in from a household because the opening is so wide. I suggest that since we are stuck with the current trash cans that we have, the ones that have not disappeared, that DPW please pick them up on every night. Every night these trash cans can be open, can be emptied. In Brightwood, they overflow constantly. It could be a Friday night. I pass it on Monday, just garbage. So I'm requesting that that all of these bills are passed and that DPW picks up every night. I'm also responsible for a part of Fort Stevens Rec. Fort Stevens Rec Recreation Center has dumpsters, it has trash cans. There's always back and forth if this is GDS or this is DPW. There's a lot of back and forth there. But the bottom line is these cans are not emptied on a regular basis. The dumpsters are not emptied on the regular basis. Children play there. There's rats in the trash cans. They run around. It is a mess. There has been some progress, and I have to thank Councilmember Janice Lewis George for helping with Fort Stevens. She has, but there is still a remaining issue of the garbage cans there and the dumpsters not being emptied on a regular basis. So I thank the council member. I thank the councilman, everyone involved with these bills and the committee. It is very important that DC is clean, that we look clean, that we are clean, that children can play at recreation centers without a fear of rats running around them, and that our main avenues and our sidewalks have trash cans so our citizens can put litter in it. But you don't want our trash cans to be overflowing. We want to keep the city clean, and we're asking for help to do that. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Commissioner. We'll now hear from Alicia Hammond.
Thank you, Chairperson Nadeau. Hi, everyone. My name is Alicia Hammond. I'm a resident of ANC 1D in Columbia Heights. Today, I'm here to support all three bills, but I would in particular like to provide testimony for 25-0132 and 25-0412. In ANC 1D, we have a persistent, pervasive loose litter problem, especially on the 3500 block of 16th Street and the 1500 block of Ogden Street. And despite efforts, large and small, to clean up our neighborhood, the problem has not been resolved. We have participated in organized group cleanups with the support of our ANC Gary, and several residents also individually volunteer to pick up loose trash weekly or biweekly. I personally have submitted several 311 requests with the support of our ANC to obtain public litter containers, especially across from the bus stop or commercial businesses, as well as large residential apartments. And I recently received a notification, of course, that the request was completed and the decision was that no can was needed at any of the locations. I personally do not understand the efficacy of the process. Presumably someone comes out to inspect the area at one time and perhaps it appears clean due to volunteer efforts. And so it seems we either have to leave the trash piling up for months while the service request is open to prove that it is in fact an issue, otherwise we will not get the support. In speaking to residents who have lived in the neighborhood a lot longer than I have, they shared that trash cans were previously available on the 1500 block of Ogden, where two of my requests are located, and they were removed due to an illegal dumping problem. However, the illegal dumping problem still continues, and now we have the added issue of a major loose litter problem. Therefore, this approach has not proven effective. And so we're asking for your support for public litter containers on the 1500 block of Ogden Street, as well as the 3500 block of 16th Street across from a major bus stop, to manage the large amount of trash that develops as a result of high foot traffic coming from the bus stop, going to commercial areas and from large apartment buildings in the neighborhood. If it's an option, we're also requesting DPW support to provide staff or contractors who are able to help us pick up the loose litter and help us to keep our neighborhood clean. So many thanks for the opportunity to testify, and we appreciate your consideration in ANC 1D. Thank you.
Thank you all for your testimony. Okay, so when I checked just a moment ago, it looked like we only had Commissioner Bishop Henchman's testimony submitted online. So let's make sure we get everybody. Oh, nope, Alicia Hammond is up there now too. Excuse me. So let's make sure we get everybody because we want it all in the record. All right, so we're going to do 10-minute rounds. We've also been joined by Councilmember Janice Lewis George. So we will go to her third and give her the opportunity to make an opening statement. All right, so that was a lot. And all of it very much reflected the experiences that I've had too in Ward 1. In fact, I was just looking through the attachments that the agency sent over, and I noticed that just in the first 6 pages, every request in Ward 1 is either closed out with residential, which means we're not putting a can in, no can needed, or can was already there, except for one spectacular exception, which is recycling can needed to be removed, which we will be getting into later because all of the recycling cans are special ones that I paid for in our budget. So I hope that any recycling can removed can be accounted for at this point. In any case, I really appreciate everyone coming and talking about how the process is being implemented at the moment, and really, I think, illustrating why we do need the law to be passed. So we'll get into that today. Commissioner Patterson, you were talking about a specific type of can. Can you say that what that was again?
Big Belly.
Big Belly. Okay, got you. I know that was
BELLY. And they are on
excuse me,
the 1400 block of P Street, literally right in front of the Whole Foods in Logan Circle.
Is that
but
what's
they're nowhere
behind?
else that I have seen.
I think that's what's behind Councilmember Lewis George and her screensaver right now. in her
Aha.
wallpaper right now. Yeah, those are cool. And I know
Yes,
that
they
DPW,
compact the trash. So it prevents them from overflowing. And there's a signal that goes to some government agency. Hey, it's time to pick up the trash.
right. I know DPW has been looking at some of that tech, which is good because the can that we have right now is the can that we've had for a very, very long time and was chosen under different conditions and circumstances. So it's always good to be examining that, just the way that we are looking at the different containers we use in other regards. And we have a pilot coming this year for residential trash collection containers, being communal, where folks can go punch in their code and then they just put their bag in. So I'm definitely trying to do some more innovation here. Let's see. I think we've got everything that we need from this panel. And so I'm going to turn to Councilmember Henderson for questions and see what she has to say. And then we'll turn to Councilmember Lewis George.
Thank you, Chair Nadeau, and good afternoon, and thank you. Well, good afternoon. Ooh, it is 10. Good morning to this panel of public witnesses. And I appreciate all of your testimony. I myself, sometimes when I'm walking, feel like I'm taking like crazy pills where I pass the trash can on Monday and I pass it on Friday and it's still full. And not that it's just still full, but also, one of the little bags that's kind of hanging off on the side is still hanging off on the side. So you know that nobody came because it's still there. I actually raised this yesterday with the director of Parks and Rec during her nomination hearing, because a lot of places in the public space where we have issues around trash are in parks and open space where DPR is supposed to manage the area, but DPW is responsible for picking up the trash, or maybe it's DGS. This is part of the confusing piece of who is responsible for what when. But for some of the public witnesses who have been commissioners, who are more seasoned as commissioners, so you've been doing this for a couple of DPW directors, I'm curious, had there been a time prior where you would receive notice before a trash can was removed and that just stopped, or has that never occurred? Commissioner Palmer, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm gonna put you
That's
on the
fine.
spot.
You can put me on the spot. In my experience, we've never received notice, but we also didn't really see the broader removal of cans until more recently. So it seems to have been a more common trend. So maybe it was happening more infrequently and was less noticeable for that reason, or not happening at all before. But it does seem clustered in the 2021-2022 timeframe.
Okay. And I'm just curious about this, that all of you have had this experience where they said, oh, it was the abuse of a can, and so we removed it, when the abuse is just that the can was full and nobody emptied it, which is an interesting definition of abuse, right? Like, no, that actually signals to me that somebody was using it, but there are other things that are going on. And we've brought this up with DPW before, when it used to be under the Committee on Transportation and the Environment, around, do we have enough sweep inspectors? What does that look like? What does the communication look like so that folks are not putting their household trash into the community receptacle? And that's part of the reason why I introduced the legislation that I did, is that we find there are some people who live in, I would call them medium-sized condominiums or flipped units, where the landlord or the building developer never set up trash collection for the home. And because they don't get collection from DPW and the cost of a private hauler is such an expense, they say, okay, well then I'll just take my trash to the nearest trash can from a public receptacle standpoint, or even a dumpster in front of the other areas. Some of you have in your single member districts, or just in your ANCs altogether, buildings that would qualify under this, where they have 8 units or less. I'm curious if you've had conversations with constituents around how the tax credit that they receive from the city is just not enough to cover the cost of private hauling. Commissioner Bishop Hinchman?
Yes, I've heard that from one owner in the area. So.
Okay. Anyone else?
Councilmember, I haven't heard that specifically, but just to talk an example related to the bill, which I support your bill as well, Lorenzo Allen Park, on a continual basis, I've never witnessed someone doing it, but you can just see it on any given day. People will leave their household trash there. And I think it's indicative of the issues that you raised. And just going back to your prior question, I reached out to DPW at some point in my tenure as commissioner when the park was in my S&D, just asking, number one, how often is DPW collecting the trash there? And eventually they finally claimed it was once a week. And I said, you really need to be coming out here at least twice a week. And just never got a response back. So I made the case to them, I showed them photos, and just nothing happened. So
yeah.
Council member, I'll just add that ANC 4B has heard that is part of the issue from the multi-unit buildings.
That trash collection is not something that's happening at their property, and therefore they're taking their trash other places. Okay. That's also, I mean, I think you all represent sort of, let's see, I'm counting up where you're located, Eckington, Uptown, Columbia Heights, Brightwood in the middle. But it's also a serious issue that I hear from residents east of the river as well, where they're seeing a lot more small family condo units that are coming online, and someone moves in and then they realize, oh, I have no trash. So what am I supposed to do with, my rubbish, if you will? And so we just feel like there are more creative ways to do this. The other thing that an impetus of the legislation that we introduce is that I often see the DPW truck go by, and then 2 hours later, a smaller hauler as well come by from a private company, which is, I don't know, you have more trucks on the road. It's still more disruptive to the neighborhood from a sound perspective. There are just a lot of different moving pieces. And it's weird to me that if you are a private condominium complex, small, that is next to a line of single family homes, would it not be more efficient for DPW to just keep going? To just pick up from everyone, especially from, this is going to come up again when we get to the Christmas trees, Councilmember Nadeau, whereas condo owners feel like, oh, I'll just put my Christmas tree out front and DPW will pick it up because everybody else is doing it, not realizing that they don't qualify. And then the Christmas tree is there at the 4th of July as well. But I appreciate you all testifying on these issues. Solid waste collection management is not the sexiest of topics. I think for some of the folks over at DPW, they do find their work to be quite invigorating and interesting. But it is central when we talk about clean streets, what people want and feel in their neighborhood and community, and also not wanting to feel as though government services are neglecting their area. So having public trash cans, having them have the trash being removed on a regular basis. These are all going into what people feel like, well, my tax dollars are going into this. Why isn't it being handled? So I appreciate that.
Council member.
Oh, yes.
Councilmember Hyde, this is Kim Patterson, ANC in Brightwood. There's an issue in Brightwood with slumlords. Their dumpsters are overflowing and they're filled with rats. So what happens? The individuals that live in the apartments of these slumlords are too afraid to take their trash and put it in the dumpster because they don't want to be attacked by rats. So they go to the public cans that line 14th Street from Military to Aspen, and there's other areas in Brightwood. This is just my S&D that I witnessed. And the trash cans are overflowing and they're not picked up on a regular basis. So you have street trash, you have household trash. The household trash in my community mainly comes from individuals that live in the apartment buildings that are too afraid to take their trash to their dumpsters because the slumlords don't have them emptied properly, and nobody wants to be out there with rats. So that is a problem in Brightwood. I'm sure it's throughout the city as well.
Yeah, I think as we talk about, oh, we need to get a handle on our rat problem, getting a handle on our solid waste collection is part of that.
Yes, it is.
And I think you definitely underscored that. Thank you so much, Councilmember Doe. I don't have any further questions.
Thank you. We'll now turn to Councilmember Lewis George. If you'd like to, you can make an opening statement before your time begins.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Doe, for holding today's hearing and for including my bill B 25-1 through 32, the requirement to provide notice of intent to remove public litter containers, Amendment Act of 2023. As was mentioned, I was pleased to introduce the legislation with 7 of my colleagues, including yourself, and believe it can make a small but impactful impact on keeping our streets clean. And also a co-introducer of Councilmember Henderson's Taking Rubbish Away from Small Homes, Trash Amendment Act. Kudos for the great title. I was also proud to introduce the Containing Litter and Ensuring Adequate Neighborhood, the Clean Collections Amendment Act last year to address many of the same litter and overflowing trash issues we heard our ANCs testify about earlier, especially in our multifamily properties who sometimes don't have big enough containers, the proper containers, or frequent enough collections. For this haulers, it's my hope that we can mark the bill, that bill up with these bills later this year. We had a hearing on the clean collections at the end of last year in the committee of the whole, and then it was referred to the T&E committee this year, even though DPW is in your committee, and so the chairman is re-referring it to your committee. So my hope is, since we had a hearing, we could mark them up with it, because that was to address an issue really in Brightwood where we were seeing there's really not defined standards for many of our multifamily buildings and the type of trash cans, the frequency of how they pick up their trash cans. It's very vague, and so enforcement is also opaque. This legislation has been mentioned. Last summer, my office started getting a lot of calls and emails about disappearing litter cans. At first, we thought someone might be stealing them, or perhaps they were being removed because of nearby construction. But no, they were being taken off the streets by our own government. And so the explanation we got from DPW is that too many people were misusing the litter cans, most often by placing household trash in them. And while I agree people shouldn't use litter cans for private use, I don't agree that the solution to this problem is to remove the cans for everyone. As was just talked about, we're still seeing way too many rats, and the amount of trash being produced hasn't gotten any smaller. We've got a dozen. I mean, our amazing commissioners have described it from both 4B, 4A, and 4D, but we've got dozens of bus stops, rec centers, and scattered street corners that should have public litter cans and don't have them anymore. To Director Spriggs' credit and his team, I want to shout out Mr. Dance and the Ward 4 sweep team. They have started putting some of them back and been more open to explaining what's happening, which we appreciate. I'm also glad that DPW has already begun implementing portions of this bill, including notifying residents before removing public litter cans. But it doesn't sound like there is some inconsistencies based on the testimony we received earlier. So I think moving forward and putting this in place is important. Commissioner Patterson has already spoken, but she is the first person who notified me about these big belly cans, which I agree with, which is behind me. That seems like a great option for us in Ward 4. I'm not sure the status of the pilot, but that's a question I have for the director today. How do we move from pilot to across the district? I'm grateful for today's hearing and appreciate our public witnesses for taking time to speak with us today. The other issue is sort of agency, who owns what. To Councilmember Henderson's question, DPW handles public litter cans for trash in DPR spaces. DGS handles public recycling cans in DPR spaces. DGS also handles all dumpsters on public space, trash or recycling. And so it become a huge issue. We've been doing more to sort of scrutinize. I went to Marvin Gaye DPR Center back during my ward tours in Ward 7, and they were trying to convince me that the contractor had actually came and cleaned up Marvin Gaye, and somehow between 8 a.m. and 10 a.m., that trash had accumulated in the space. So we've been also trying to scrutinize contractors who are responsible for picking up trash in DPR spaces. And DGS is about to bring trash and recycling services back in-house, which should allow us to have better oversight over that work, which is my hope. So I just wanted to say that thank you to our commissioners who ANC 4B and 4D and 4A each sent multiple letters and resolutions on this topic, which I hope we that we'll be discussing today. Our Ward 4 ANCs past and present have been very clued in on this as well. So I'm optimistic that we can work together on resolving this and appreciates everyone combined efforts to keep our streets clean and safe. I wanted to just ask commissioners, I think now they've been doing some notifications, or DPW is saying they're doing notifications. I understand DPW said they're starting to implement portions of the bills. So I just wanted to know, have any of ANC commissioners been notified recently in advance of any litter cans being removed, or any notifications of any cans that are going to be placed as of now? Have you started to get any notifications? Anyone? Yeah. Commissioner Bishop Hinchman.
Thank you, council member. So we had 4 cans placed this year in 5F, 2 kind of going back to or replacing removed ones, and then 2 new ones. This really isn't a process, but here's kind of how it happened is, people put in 311 requests. I asked DPW like how they want ANCs to weigh in on this. They didn't really give clear guidance, so we passed a resolution because we'll give them the great weight and decide, and then see what they do with it. Then kind of nothing happened for months, and then council member's office got involved, and then something happened very quickly, and then I got an email from Celeste from DPW saying, do you sign off on this request? And I replied back yes, and then we got some of the cans in, although not the one that Celeste asked about actually. So that's the current process, at least in my experience.
Okay.
Council member?
Yes, Commissioner Palmer.
Yeah, we a while back had a resolution asking for the reinstallation of certain cans and the installation of new cans. And DPW acted very quickly and put all of those in. That seemed like a very strange fluke, frankly, and like we asked at the right time when they were facing some sort of pressure. We appreciate those cans, but that happened very quickly and without communication. So some 311 requests were closed out, but we didn't get any sort of immediate notification that something was happening.
Okay. And then, so it seems like it's just like right now, it's still not a uniform process. It's just, there's no sort of direct notification happening. And there's some in between different 311 requests and agencies and who's asking for it. As far as frequency, if you all could weigh in as we look to, mark up as legislation gets marked up, what would you say should be the mechanism for what we put in place as far as frequency of pickup? And it could vary by location, right? Some DPR centers, they have parties, so maybe those need to be daily. Some of the cans near schools, rec centers, commercial corridors, but just really asking you to weigh in on what you think would be if we're gonna put it in statutorily, what should we say the frequency should be?
Councilmember, I would suggest daily. That's what NOMA bid does, and they're able to do it.
Okay.
I echo that.
I agree with that. I mean, especially because the trash cans are not closed, they're open. So at night, the rats feast in them. So they need to be picked up daily.
Yeah, I would say daily, council member, but if DPW gives you pushback and says we don't have the resources to do daily, if you had to prioritize it, my opinion would be at rec centers right near playgrounds especially. I mean, I can't tell you how discouraging it is when I take my 2 little kids to a playground and someone partied the night before and there's food everywhere, rats are scurrying around, like we have to leave. Like we can't literally enjoy the playground because it's a public safety concern for my children. So
Okay. All right, thank you. Again, thank you everybody for your testimony and your work on this. And thank you, Councilmember Nadeau. I look forward to working with the committee to mark these up. Thank you.
Nope, not going to make that mistake again. You got to unmute the right microphone. Thank you, council member. And thank you everybody for your testimony. Truly appreciate it. If you haven't uploaded your written testimony yet, please do that as soon as possible. Okay, and now I'd like to turn to our government witnesses from the Department of Public Works. We have 3 panelists and we're going to have them up all at once. Anthony Crispino, Deputy Director of the Department of Public Works, Jessica Smith, Chief Administrative Officer, Department of Public Works, and Christine Davis, General Counsel, Department of Public Works. Let you get settled up there. Great. And then I'm going to have all 3 of you take the oath because I know some of you will be answering questions. Just raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury the testimony you're about to give to the Committee on Public Works and Operations is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Great. You may begin your testimony.
Morning, Chairperson Nadeau, members and staff of the Committee on Public Works and Operations. As you might be aware, I'm Anthony Crispino, Deputy Director of the Department of Public Works, and I'm here today to testify on behalf of DPW Director Timothy Spriggs regarding 3 bills which would impact DPW. Bill 25182, the Taking Rubbish Away from Small Homes Amendment Act of 2023. Bill 25132, the requirement to provide notice of intent to remove public litter cans Amendment Act of 2023, and Bill 25412, the Litter Control Amendment Act of 2023. Joining me today are our agency's Chief Administrative Officer, Jessica Smith, and our General Counsel, Christine V. Davis. DPW employees consistently work hard to perform the highest level of services for the residents of the District of Columbia. With respect to sanitation services, we collect trash once or twice per week from single-family residences and residential buildings with 3 or fewer units, depending on where the residence or building is located. We collect recycling once a week from single-family homes and residential buildings with 3 or fewer units. DPW does not collect from mixed-use residential commercial buildings or residential buildings with 4 or more units. Apartment buildings with 4 or more dwelling units, mixed-use residential commercial buildings, and commercial properties are required to contract for their own trash and recycling collection services. DPW also collects large bulky items and yard waste by appointment from residential households that receive DPW trash and recycling collection services. In addition, we enforce sanitation regulations and laws throughout the district. I will now discuss each bill in turn. Bill 25182, the Taking Rubbish Away from Small Homes Amendment Act of 2023, was introduced by Council Members Henderson, Nadeau, Louis George, Allen, Pinto, and Parker. That bill provides that beginning on October 1st, 2024, a condominium building or structure with less than 8 dwelling units shall be eligible to receive residential solid waste collection services from the district. And to receive residential solid waste collection services from the district, the condominium board of the building or structure shall register with the mayor on a form approved by the mayor. The bill also provides that beginning January 1st, 2024, and every 3 years thereafter, the chief financial officer shall submit to the council a study which includes certain information regarding the tax credit issued to owners of condominium dwelling units or homeowners who do not receive solid waste collection services from the district. Lastly, the bill would amend Chapter 7, Title 21 of the district municipal regulations to change from 4 to 20 the number of dwelling units that a residential building or structure must contain in order to be ineligible to receive district collection services. DPW does not support Bill 25182 due to the significant and adverse impact it would have on our resources and services. As I've mentioned previously, we currently collect solid waste, including trash, recycling, and bulk waste from single-family homes and multi-family properties with 3 or fewer dwelling units. This constitutes approximately 105,000 residences across the district. Based on data obtained from the district's master address repository, DPW estimates that if Bill 25-182 was to become law, it would increase our service area by 35% or 37,000 residences and cost of our services in the amount of tens of millions of dollars. We would first like to illustrate our current operational state and how we collect trash and recycling for our residents. We do the following. First, we verify eligibility for collection services for the location. Second, we create a new location on a map or addition to an existing route if feasible. 3, we deliver the new containers for trash and recycling to the residents. And 4, we notify the residents of their trash and recycling collection days and the point of collection for the house. DPW assigns 1 driver and 2 sanitation workers to each collection vehicle, and they are given a route for the trash and or recycling collection for that day. Before starting, the driver is expected to conduct a pre-trip inspection to ensure the vehicle's safety. And then once the inspection clears the vehicle for operation, the crew proceeds to the designated route. On the route, the sanitation workers attach green, which are the trash, and or blue, which are the recycling containers, to the back of the truck, which are then lifted and emptied into the truck's hopper by an automated lift. This process for each route typically takes 4 to 6 hours, depending on the route's size. Once the route is finished, the driver and sanitation workers head to a disposal facility to unload the collected materials. A crew may need to dump its load before its route is completed, which adds time and cost to the process. After disposing of the materials at the facility, the crew then returns to the yard. They perform a post-trip inspection on the vehicle and submit paperwork to their supervisor, marking the end of their work for the day. In addition, we collect trash and recycling with rear loading trucks designed to accommodate up to 96-gallon super cans. The collection process for multi-unit buildings with more than 3 units involves large capacity dumpsters and the use of specialized front-loading trucks, neither of which are currently in our fleet. The acquisition of both would require substantial capital and a lengthy process to build the capacity we would replace. Having described the process by which DPW's crews and equipment operate in the collection of trash and recycling, we hope it is evident that DPW does not have the personnel and resources to service these additional residences under the provisions of Bill 25-182. Finally, the bill is inconsistent in 2 areas. The bill provides in Section 2 that the district shall collect from condominium buildings and residential structures with less than 8 dwelling units, but states in another section that a building would be ineligible for collection services if it has 20 or more units. In addition, the tax credit portion of the bill also references language regarding 8 or fewer units. This should be clarified if the committee takes any further action on this bill. We therefore ask you to consider the ramifications and impact of Bill 25-182 would have on DPW before moving forward on this legislation. Furthermore, if you do decide to move forward with the bill at some point, we ask you that you delay the effectiveness of the bill until at least October of 2026. The reason for this is DPW needs this time to adequately staff and resource operations, open our new transfer station, and phase in the provisions of this bill. Turning to Bill 25-132, the requirement to provide notice of intent to remove public litter containers Amendment Act of 2023 was introduced by council members Louis George, Nadeau, Robert White, Bonds, Pinto, Gray, Parker, and Allen. The bill would provide that DPW must give 30 days written notice excluding Saturdays, Sundays, and legal holidays of any intent by the agency to remove a public litter container to the Office of Advisory Neighborhood Commissions. Each affected ANC or Advisory Neighborhood Commission and the commissioner representing a single member district affected by any such removal. This notice shall include a brief description of why DPW believes removing the litter container will improve neighborhood cleanliness and public health. First, it's important to note that DPW is actively implementing efficiencies and process improvements in the litter can operation, from prioritizing repairs to improving communications with the ANCs regarding installations and removals. Our first phase of these improvements involved a notification process prior to public litter can removal. Under this process, a resident enters a service request for removal or installation of a public litter can, and it is advised via 311 that their request will be sent to the respective ANC commissioner. DPW then vets the location and investigates the history of the location with an inspector from our Solid Waste Education and Enforcement Program, or SWEEP division. The recommendation for the litter can is then sent by DPW via email to the ANC. At that point, the ANC has up to 30 days to respond and either disagree or agree with DPW's recommendation. If the request was for removal, after the 30-day period, DPW then removes the can. If the request was for an installation, DPW has a can in the inventory, then we install the can. After the entire process is completed, the resident is advised of the outcome via the 311 system. Since there is already a notification process for the removal of public litter cans, we do not have a specific position on Bill 25132 and believe that the bill is therefore probably unnecessary. That said, we will continue to refine our process and procedures, however, to improve the litter can operations and service to the district. It's important to mention, though, in FY23, DPW only removed one public litter can and relocated one public recycling can at the request of our agency partners. The former was due to sidewalk construction at the request of DDOT, and the latter was moved from the street to the interior of a park at the request of DPR. It's also important to note that not all public litter cans in the district are under the purview of DPW. There are other entities that with control over public litter cans in the district, including various business improvement districts or BIDs, DPR, and NPS. In addition, a public litter can might be removed by a construction crew doing work in the immediate area. This is not something that would have been approved by DPW and is not necessarily something that we are aware of unless it is brought to our attention. Litter cans are also removed by accident cleanup crews, and ANCs have worked with DPW to notify us of these removals and reinstall the cans. In this fiscal year, we are strengthening the relationship and communication process with our ANC stakeholders. Finally, turning to Bill 25412, the Litter Control Amendment Act of 2023, which was introduced by Chairman Mendelson at the request of Mayor Bowser, would provide DPW the authority to serve a party cited for an infraction of the Litter Control Administration Act of 1985 with a notice of violation by first-class mail. Currently, DPW is authorized to serve such an NOV only on a party only by personal service, certified mail, or conspicuous posting. The bill would also clarify that a residential premise may be inspected and investigated by DPW for an alleged Litter Control Act violation. DPW strongly supports this bill. The ability of DPW to serve an NOV by first-class mail would eliminate the requirement that we submit a copy of the signed certified mail receipt or green card before filing a case against the alleged violator with the Office of Administrative Hearings. This requirement is outdated and has resulted in both filed cases being dismissed by OEH and in DPW being unable to file cases against an individual in the first place. In both instances, dismissal and the inability to file, the individual avoids service, refuses to accept and sign the certified mail NOV, and or the post office does not return the green card to DPW. Without proof of service, we are unable to obtain orders for abatement and hold property owners accountable for the condition of their property. This impedes our mission to achieve cleaner neighborhoods in the district. In addition, the cost of serving an NOV by first-class mail is much less expensive than serving an NOV by certified mail. The Office of Revenue Analysis prepared a fiscal impact statement for this bill stating that DPW in the district could possibly save over $300,000 per year by serving NOVs by first-class mail. Furthermore, this situation has resulted in the potential loss of revenue to the district in Litter Control Act fines, which are unrecoverable due to the inability to file cases and or case dismissals. Lastly, there is precedent for authorizing DPW to serve NOVs by first-class mail, as the Department of Buildings currently does so, and the former Department of Consumer and Regulatory Affairs did for years. This bill would also clarify that a residential property may be inspected by DPW for Litter Control Act violations. Currently, there is an anomaly in the law that provides that only non-residential properties can be inspected for such violations. The Office of the Attorney General determined that since DPW already has the authority to investigate housing providers' compliance with all waste regulations enforced by DPW relating to the proper storage of solid waste intended to prevent provision of food, harborage, or breeding places for insects and rodents, and that since investigating housing providers necessarily means investigating residential properties, this same authority can extend to residential properties under Bill 25412. Therefore, we respectfully ask that you and the committee move expeditiously on Bill 25412 so that we can sustain more cases at OAH requiring property owners to abate Litter Control Act violations and clean up their properties. And so the DPW and the district can realize significant savings regarding the cost of mailing an NOV by first-class mail versus serving it by certified mail. This bill would thus realize the dual purposes of cost savings and a cleaner District of Columbia. This is the extent of my testimony regarding Bills 25182, 25132, and 25412. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before the committee, and we are now ready to answer your questions.
Great. Thank you so much for your testimony. We'll do 10-minute rounds. I want to start with a clarification. Are your estimates on this is for the trash bill, by the way, I'll do it in sections. Are your estimates on cost and increased coverage based on covering buildings with fewer than 20 units or buildings with 8 or fewer?
8 or fewer.
Okay. Thank you. And then could buildings with 8 or fewer units be properly serviced by the types of trucks and trash containers DPW currently uses, or would dumpsters and front loading trucks still be required?
We would still require, in most instances, it's my understanding that we would require the purchase of dumpsters and front loading trucks to service these types of buildings, just based on the volume that they produce.
Right. What we don't want is just these buildings that have had dumpsters to just have like a row of bins instead.
Correct.
Yeah. Can you talk about how the opening of the new Benning Road transfer station would help DPW implement the provisions of the bill?
Absolutely. So as you are definitely aware, but the public might not be aware, several years back, the district operated 2 transfer stations in the District of Columbia. A transfer station is the mechanism or the building by which we bring trash in from the street and then load it onto larger trucks to take it to its final place of disposal. 18 months ago or so, we had a catastrophic fire at Benning Road, which disabled the building, and we had to decommission it. That forced the agency to put all of the trash flow through the Fort Totten station, which is about a 30,000 square foot tipping floor. And it's taken on a lot of wear and tear as a result. The building was built in the 1960s, and it takes a lot to keep it up. By adding Benning Road back into our portfolio, either at the previous size tipping floor or an expanded tipping floor size, we will be able to take some of the strain off of Fort Totten, but also have more available bandwidth to bring trash in and take trash out of the district. In addition, having Benning Road back, since it'll be a newer facility with an eye towards the future, the director and I are looking to expand the type of services that we perform at the facility, which would thus impact the waste stream.
One of the other issues with having Benning down is something you mentioned in your testimony about having to unload in mid-route. So everybody, no matter where they're hauling, has to come all the way to Totten to do that.
Correct.
Which is true for also street sweeping and yeah.
Correct. All of the waste stream comes through Fort Totten now. It doesn't matter if you're east of the river, far northwest, the city core, everybody has to go to Totten to unload and have it removed from the district.
Okay. And remind me of our timeline for Benning as we're having this conversation.
Spring of 2027.
Right. So we're ways off. Okay. Do you think that DPW providing services to these smaller buildings could help with some of the issues that Councilmember Henderson and some of our commissioners touched on, such as renters taking their trash to public containers because their own building dumpsters are overflowing and full of rats?
It's hard to say with certainty, but it could. It depends on the frequency that the dumpsters are emptied, frankly.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what it comes down to. A dumpster only has so much capacity. If it's not empty, trash has to go somewhere. And what we're finding is that it then ends up in public litter cans in a lot of places. And that's where we have to bring sweep in.
I think one of the reasons we're having this conversation and that this bill exists is in some ways a compliment to DPW in the sense that folks are displeased with the private hauling options and would prefer government hauling. Have you heard similar concerns about private hauling, and what ability does DPW have to improve those services?
In terms of improving the service provided by the private haulers, we have very little. I mean, it's a free market. The buildings, each of the buildings are HOAs. They're free to contract with whoever they want for trash services. I can say that since my return to DPW in the past 6 months, we have stepped in at the request sometimes of council or the city administrator's office to assist with buildings that have found themselves in a lapse of services. And we'll send a crew out to, under certain circumstances, send a crew out to abate the overflowing trash. But it's not really something that we can impact on a large scale at this point.
And what happens, does DPW have any oversight or citation authority when a private hauler is not doing their job, or when a building is in violation of public cleanliness and health standards?
We do through sweep. Excuse me, we do through our sweep inspectors. Our sweep, because the relationship between the private hauler and the multifamily residence is contractual, we work with the property owner, sometimes just through education, other times through ticketing, encouraging them to increase the frequency of collection. If the private hauler only comes once a week and your dumpster for your building is overflowing every week, you're not having frequent enough collections. So our sweep inspectors work with the property owners or the property managers. And if they don't respond to the educational resources that we provide, we then ticket them, and that encourages them to increase the frequency of collection.
Do you find people are responsive to the citations?
It's a 50-50. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. Oftentimes multiple tickets have to be issued.
Sure.
Before they see the value in increasing the collection versus paying DPW's fines.
Do you feel the fines are high enough to motivate that behavior change?
Well, the fines titrate up. So after your first offense is $150. Your second offense is $300. Your third offense is $600, and your fourth is $1,000. So if you've got 4 offenses that are being adjudicated, you've got $1,000, $600, $300, and $150 to pay for those fines.
That's great. And I'm trying to think. Okay. And yeah, and I've had interesting conversations with private haulers about this too, where, you know, they may be recommending to the property that they do more frequent or more containers. And it's either, you know, it's just not something that the property is interested in. And so I guess the question is like, what does it take to actually make that change? And if you're any examples you can think of where it's made a difference, where the system we have has made a difference in getting folks to change their counts?
I can't give you any examples specifically, but I do know that our outreach efforts work sometimes.
Yeah.
Short of a ticket.
Sure.
And then other times we have to use our ticketing mechanisms to get them to understand.
Yeah.
I cannot say that we have a long list of repeat offenders for housing providers. We do have them, but they're not necessarily for insufficient collection.
Okay.
They're for other issues.
For other issues, yeah.
Yes.
And that may be a deeper issue.
Yes.
With
And
that
council
housing
member,
provider.
can I just add, we're really excited at the Office of Waste Diversion. We just onboarded 6 additional recycling outreach staff members who are going to focus solely on multifamily buildings. Now they're going to focus on the recycling side, but that of course will have an impact if buildings start recycling. We're finding that a lot of these big buildings are not recycling or not recycling properly. And so I do think that's one area where we're trying to be creative and innovative with this new group of staff members who will focus on multifamily homes where we've seen some of these issues.
That's great to hear because we've definitely gotten those complaints from residents who are concerned about what's happening with their recycling in their building.
absolutely.
So I'm thrilled to hear that. Also had a very tense conversation with a resident yesterday about not wanting to take the recyclables out of the bag. But his can was not getting picked up. And there was a back and forth. It was quite a heated back and forth on email. And I did indicate to him that if he took them out of the bag, I expect that it would be collected, but we'll see what happens. He did threaten to sue us over that. So good luck to us all. But it is important to remind folks that there are reasons for that, right? This is so that the equipment is not damaged, and having been out to the recycling facility in Manassas now and seen how it all works, which is highly educational, and I recommend it to colleagues and others. It is really critical that we take our recycling seriously as the waste diversion program expands. And today's not the day, but I'm also very excited about our composting program. And, you know, as much as we're talking about landfill waste today, there are a lot of exciting initiatives that we have to reduce that altogether. Okay, so I am going to pause for this round. I'm going to wrap up this round, and in the next round, we'll go to the next bill. And we should keep talking to you about the commercial hauling piece of this and what we can do together to improve it as we are also considering this bill. So I will now turn to Councilmember Henderson for a 10-minute round of questions.
Thank you, Councilmember Nadeau, and good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
I appreciate your testimony, and I thank you guys for being here. As I stated in my opening statement, this wasn't an idea that I just had myself. This was a conversation that we had with the prior interim director for DPW, and then he retired on me before we had an opportunity to sort of get this going. But one of the things that it honestly came to my attention was I had a constituent who reached out to me who basically said, the credit that the city provides is a joke in comparison to what it costs to get private hauling for solid waste in a frequent basis, such as you talk about, right? Like you want to make sure that it's not sitting there. And I'm curious to your knowledge. So we set the tax credit at $60 in 1992. And then we said, okay, well, just tie it to the consumer price index. To your knowledge, has anyone gone back to review to see whether or not $125 is still worth it?
Everyone looks at me because I've been here the longest. But to my knowledge, no. That really would be a function of the CFO's office, and we'd work with them collaboratively in figuring it out, but not to my knowledge. I will note that in the past, we set some fees or rates and had them subject to CPI adjustments, and the CPI adjustment just does not keep up with costs, inflation, and real world costs of operating or anything. So having that solely without going back to review it like every 5 years or so,
right,
is not going to be sufficient. You're never going to actually cover your costs,
okay,
in my opinion.
So what I'm hearing is maybe there's an agreement that at least at the very least, we should review what we're doing on that.
We do not object to that at all.
Okay. I was actually just looking at what Montgomery County charges, and they're at $160 per year. That's for single family for pickup. Because I think that's the other kind of unique thing. Other jurisdictions that I have been, I've lived in, when you get your tax bill or whatever, it outlines, and like solid waste collection is a line item. It's not just considered part of your regular taxes, but it's also delineated so that people can see what it is. And that's, I mean, this is before all of our times, right? When we started doing solid waste collection as part of the municipal services, there was a decision made not to charge. But in thinking about for some of these smaller multifamily dwellings, the fact that they don't even have the option to buy in if they wanted to, I actually saw this as an opportunity for the city to generate some revenue. Well, first off, if we had a multi-dwelling unit that was purchased buying in to the DPW services, number one, we don't have to pay them the credit. So that's one in terms of a savings. But two, perhaps the district can offer a more competitive option than what some of the private haulers are, particularly for those where it's a multi-dwelling unit that is sitting nestled amongst a bunch of single family dwellings anyway. So it's not a crazy lift for you all in terms of drivers having to go out of their way. You're already on the block. Now it does add to the amount of waste that's being collected. And I think you talked a little bit about that with Councilmember Nadeau, but that's what I was trying to get at is, can we explore setting up a system by which we give people we give these condominium associations the option to choose the district as its person?
I believe it might be more cost effective to adjust the credit than to have the services provided by DPW. We're going to have a substantial ramp up cost because of the type of equipment used to collect from units of that size, 8 or fewer. We don't currently possess that equipment, either the trucks or the dumpsters. The size of our alleys impacts the size of the equipment that we can purchase.
Right.
So it's more complex than DPW just delivering the services. We appreciate the idea that we deliver quality services, and this is a service that we could provide. The problem is the cost to ramp up to provide that quality service.
Okay.
It may be more efficient, cost effective to adjust the credit for those buildings than it is for DPW to provide that service.
That's fair. So just to clarify, there's nothing in the fleet right now that would allow for a dumpster collection?
No, we do not.
So all of our trucks, little feedback, sorry about that. All of our trucks are rear collection trucks. So the opening, the hopper in the back has 2 hydraulic lifts, which latch on to either your recycling can or your trash can and assist with the weight and dump it into the back of the hopper.
Yep.
However, the units in question that we're talking about, you're talking about a dumpster that's almost the size of this table. The truck has to hit it from the front with 2 forks,
Yep,
lifts
and
it
then
over the
lift it
cab
over.
and dumps it into the back. The cost per unit of those trucks compared to what we currently have it could be 1/3 to almost double in terms of how much they cost per unit. And we don't have any
1/3 to double the cost of
the current cost
the current cost of a single hauler.
per unit.
Am I
Per truck.
per truck?
Per truck.
Okay.
And then you also have to buy the dumpsters that the private hauler would then be pulling out of the building. And depending on the size of the building, it could be more than 1 dumpster. And we don't currently use those dumpsters, so we don't have any in inventory.
Okay. So, all right. So I'll give you that. That perhaps there could be a different way to do this. This bill has focused on residential collection. What about commercial? i.e., small businesses who would like to buy in to the DPW services, but they don't use dumpsters per se. I'm talking about like a small marketing firm that has 6 employees and, they have a storefront office. They're paying for a private hauler for their collection when in fact, the amount of waste that they are generating is actually enough that if they were on 14th Street or Georgia Avenue and putting their trucks out front side on the curb, you guys would go past it anyway.
A commercial building, correct. We don't collect from commercial currently. But what if, that's where I was going.
I know, I'm asking hypothetical here.
With the hypothetical, it's not as easy as just setting up a structure in which they could buy in. If in the hypothetical we were talking that you were using super cans like a single family home, the collection point wouldn't be the problem. But the downstream effects is something that we would really have to look at, because currently the trash materials that the district collects and accepts, when we dispose of that waste, it goes to Covanta where it's turned into energy, waste to energy.
Mhm.
We have a contract with Covanta that we would have to look at, because by allowing commercial properties to come in, you could substantially increase the volume of trash, and it could exceed what we're currently contracted with Covanta. They need a constant flow through in order to meet their needs in generating power. And we would, if this was going to be considered, we'd have to go back to the table and renegotiate with Covanta, to see if they had the bandwidth to accept our additional waste stream, but also what the cost would look like for that. Because the alternative would mean that instead of sending the waste to Covanta like we currently do with district trash, we would then have to resort to sending it to landfill, and the closest landfill, I believe, is in King and George County, Virginia, and so instead of a 90-minute round trip,
Mhm.
you're looking something more at the range of like 3 hours. So then it becomes, how much trash can we actually move in a day so that it's not sitting in the transfer station and risk of self-combusting as it decomposes?
Okay. Let me ask this question. Do you all put out guidance for multifamily dwellings around number of units versus what size we believe your dumpster and or can should be? Like if I were a developer and I was like, okay, I'm gonna do an eight. If I'm gonna do an 8-unit building, I don't know how many cans I need. Do you all say, hey, if you have an 8-unit building, you should have a dumpster the size of X, or X number of 96-gallon super cans?
While sweep does weigh on some issues, I don't believe we go into that level of granularity. That would be the private hauler coming in and saying, you have a building of this unit based on our business model. This is the size dumpster we recommend and the frequency of emptying said receptacle.
Okay, but do you think though, by us generating a floor, that could help mitigate some of the issues that we're seeing with buildings not having either enough frequency of collection or the right size of containers for their units?
It's possible, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm over my time on this round. Councilmember Nadeau.
Thank you. We'll now turn to Councilmember Lewis George for her round of questions.
Thank you. Thank you to the agent. I apologize, cannot be there in person. Our Friendship Ideal Charter School in Ward 4 is going to be cutting a ribbon at 12 o'clock, where I would have been there in person with you all. To follow up on Councilmember Henderson's last question she just answered, the DC, that's what we were talking about, amending the code language in last year when we did clean collections, because right now we only have they have to provide solid waste containers of sufficient capacity equivalent to 32 gallons of solid waste per residential unit. And so sufficient capacity is vague. And then we added a new check, like right now, we don't give private collection properties basically shall enter into contracts to receive its services. We don't give them a time period, but not less than twice per week. So I do think there's ability there to just within the language to set the floor here. But I want to go into B-25-132. I understand DPW is already implementing portions of my bill, like notifying ANCs in advance of removing litter cans. Is that right? And how is that going? Because we've got mixed feedback from our public witnesses earlier today, and I get mixed feedback from commissioners across my ward and other wards about this.
Good morning, council member. Thanks
Morning.
for that question. Based on feedback we received at budget and performance hearings, talking to council, talking to residents, specifically ANCs, we did know that we need to review that process, which is why we put this new process in place. It was confusing before. One neighbor might put in a 311 request to remove a can, and then we would remove it. And the next day, another neighbor could put in an installation request and we would go in and install it. And so that's why we put this process in place for the ANC to be able to weigh in. We do think that the process will work. We are still working internally to make sure that that process is followed each and every time. So I'm not going to say that there's not room for improvement here. There is, but we certainly are committed to the process. We actually just had a training last week with staff to make sure that they understood internally the process, and we're following it every time to make sure that they understood what notes should be entered. I know several ANCs mentioned having more robust notes. We agree. That's something that we're implementing agency-wide, not just for public litter cans. So the process remains. We're working internally to make sure that we're holding each and every staff member accountable to following that process.
And if I could add, I think in response to something that the ANC said, we do, consistent with the ANC enabling statute, we do give great weight to the resolutions that are passed as required of any district agency. And the other piece that I wanted to mention is that in my prior stint at DPW, when Mr. Carter was in my position, I don't believe there was any formal mechanism for conveying information to the ANCs. So that's what the three of us at the table have been working with our director to improve communications with the ANCs, because we realize that they are a partner in this.
Yeah, I appreciate that and the work that's been done there. I think you can do similar to just how DDOT does it, right? So whenever there's a traffic safety request, and then before it's done, an NOI goes out, like a notice of intent, and then the notice of intent goes to the ANC commissioners. And then there's a 10-day period for community to submit comments to weigh in. And then the final decision is made as to what the decision was based on the testimony. I think if you just do similar to DDOT, and do an NOI that gives information, and then the council, I think we, our secretary sends us all the NOIs for our ward, and so we're able to see, you know, as they're coming. So as you all look at this system, I think DDOT has a system in place already with the NOIs and the 10-day period that could be helpful in getting that, so that way it would circumvent the system. So Deputy Director, I want to ask, you testified that, I think you testified that DPW only removed one litter can in fiscal year 2023. Is that accurate? Maybe this was more of a fiscal year 22 issue, but it seemed to me be happening a lot last year before we introduced this bill. So I guess, can you share the date with the committee for, can you share data with the committee for fiscal year 2022?
Sure. Oh, no, for 23, my testimony was in regards to 23. I'm at a bit of a loss because I just got back to the agency, but I can follow up and provide you the information that you've requested. But my understanding from my staff is that in FY23, we only removed one can.
We put internally a different tracking system in place in fiscal year 23. So our records are much clearer for this past fiscal year than the previous.
Gotcha.
We did do one removal at the request of DDOT for a construction project. And we did one relocation from the outside of a park to moving just slightly to the inside of the park in fiscal year 23. I also want to clarify, and I know this has come up a few different times, DPW services cans, the bids, of course, service cans, DGS services cans, DPR services cans, and the National Park Service services cans. And so we're working to better coordinate with them. We're actually really pleased with our partnership with the bids. They've agreed to start using our tracking system so that we can see when they're moving, removing, repairing cans. So we think that's going to be a huge help. And this is not to push the blame on anyone else, but just to say it's a clarifying point that DPW does not manage every single can in the district. And so if a can is removed, it may not have been DPW that did that removal.
Got it. So I hear what you're saying. One, I want to ask, when do you think, so you all provided a map of current public litter cans and pre-hearing responses. When will you be able to get DPW to have a list or map you can post online for transparency purposes?
Of the location for every public litter can?
Correct.
We do have a map, so we can move forward with posting that map.
Okay, that's great. Is there a schedule for when each specific can get service? If so, can you share it? So for example, when you hear about Lorenzo Larry Allen Park, can I go and can I say what's the specific schedule for when this gets serviced? Is DPW supposed to pick up every can every night? And if not, why not?
So yes, we do have a schedule in which the night operations goes through, and they have assigned routes, which divvy up the cans that Ms. Smith referenced. There are, I'm not gonna, it'd be ludicrous for me to say that we get every can every night. That, you know, we have absenteeism. Sometimes we have call outs and we have to adjust scheduling accordingly. When we do run into staffing issues, though, my folks are very diligent to then reassign folks from the day shift to go back in and get the cans after the shift change has occurred. So sometimes it does appear that cans have not been hit overnight, but we strive to make sure that we touch them every single day by
So
shifting.
for example,
those.
if what I'm saying is, do you have the information? So if I was to say, how many times, would you be able to tell me like how many times Tacoma the trash at Tacoma recreation get picked up? Or I would say, how many times is it prescribed for the Lorenzo Larry Allen Park can it get picked up? Are those the same sort of, are those, so I'm understanding you're striving to hit them every single day. What is the sort of is that the requirement for every trash can? Is there like a written schedule is what I'm asking?
The schedules I'm referring to are for the public litter cans that are along the streets, the DPW services. When you start talking about the cans that are within the parks, that gets to the muddled waters over whose jurisdiction is. If it's in a park, typically it is.
Well, I mean like
DPR.
DPR, not like MPS. Yeah.
Right. So DPR would promulgate that collection schedule.
But it's DPW's job. So DPR tells DPW how many times to pick up a trash can?
No, they service their cans unless there's some sort of pre-existing arrangement. Just like with cans that are in front of other government facilities, that would be DGS, as that's in their portfolio. There may be times where we're asked to assist, but we don't have a regular schedule where we're servicing DPR or DGS cans.
Okay, well, from my DGS side, the DPW is responsible for, DPW does the public litter cans. But I guess the answer to that is there's no regular schedule then for any of our public cans, whether street cans or there's no regular schedule. It's sort of by how you do it. There's no like printed regular schedule for each trash can. Is that correct?
At a minimum, it should be 2 to 3 times a week, but when we're talking about the cans that DPW is responsible for, we do have assigned routes for the cans that are on the streets. It's a totally different situation when we're talking about parks and government facilities.
I get it. So it's 2 to 3 times for the public litter cans along streets. And then you don't have a set schedule for park-based cans. That's correct.
Correct. We service approximately 7,000 cans 2 to 3 times a week.
What happens to the cans once they're removed? You mentioned that DPW has some cans in inventory. How many cans do you have in storage right now?
We just received a shipment of cans on Tuesday, so we have 200 cans in our inventory. That wouldn't have been the case on Monday. That is like just this week we got 200 cans in.
Okay. And around commercial corridors, right? So my question is, why not expand the number of public litter cans or be more open to instilling cans when ANCs or residents request them? So when you look at what about the 6200 block of Georgia Avenue that Commissioner Patterson mentioned, it's an entirely commercial corridor full of business and bus stops. Do you all, what's the reasoning around sort of not expanding the public litter cans on business corridors?
This is something we're looking into. We do want to make sure, though, to your point earlier, that we can service them properly, right? And so right now, with nearly 7,000 cans, we're working every single night to service those 2 to 3 times a week. And so we want to make sure that we don't go and add 500 additional cans and then not be able to service them properly. And to the points that were made earlier, be attracting rodents and things of that nature. We also want to make sure we're looking at the lens of illegal dumping and how we change residents' behavior. We don't necessarily believe that adding 10 more cans along the corridor is going to stop illegal dumping. So this is something we're looking into, that we're talking to other jurisdictions about how we can change residents' behavior. Hold some of specifically our businesses accountable, because we'll see a lot of illegal dumping with our businesses on certain corridors. So we're looking at it from a holistic lens. We don't just want to add a bunch of additional litter cans and expect our problem to go away.
Okay. When you all think you'll finish that analysis?
we don't have a set time frame. Something that we just assigned to a new staff member, actually.
And because I have to leave, so just one last question here. Well, I guess two last questions, but one, we talked about changing behavior, and I know we have signs, like the little plastic signs, like do not put your personal trash here. I think as we amend sort of the floor for commercial cans, like we talked about earlier, that'll help. But we talked about these big belly trash cans, which then sort of prohibits some of the dumping and allows for the situation. Can we install more innovative cans like the big belly trash cans? And my understanding, there was a pilot. Is the pilot over? What's the date of the pilot, and when can the pilot not be a pilot but be expanded to all of the district, especially commercial corridors and places where we have the residential cans?
Councilmember, the pilot concluded in 2016. We can share the findings of the pilot with the committee. It did find that the big bellies were successful. However, they're cost prohibitive. As the deputy director mentioned, we have almost 7,000 cans throughout the city. And each big belly, I believe, was in upwards of $5,000 per can. So as we go back and assess how we are placing and assessing and determining where we're putting cans, if we're going to do big belly, we have to figure out where we're going to put them and the dollar value, the money that we have to place them and where they'll work most effectively.
Okay, gotcha. I appreciate that. And lastly, some of the requests for cans to be reinstalled in fiscal year 23 were rejected because they are in residential areas. But these areas already had public litter cans that the community needed, and now litter is piling up. Is DPW considering restoring those public litter cans that were already there, even when it's a residential area?
At this point, we're looking to fulfill installations near bus stops and businesses as our general rule of thumb. Not saying we wouldn't go out and look at a request and see if there's a special situation, but by and large, we do not install cans in residential areas.
Okay.
And in the past, when we've done that, we've gotten an equal amount of complaints from other residents when we go, because we noted we empty at night and it's not necessarily quiet. And so there's definitely two sides to the story there.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you, Chairwoman Nadeau. Thank you, DPW. And again, please give my shout out to Mr. Dance. Make sure you let him know.
We will. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, council member. One last question about the commercial haulers before we move on to the next bill. New York has commercial waste zones where they divide the city into service areas that are served by up to 3 haulers through a competitive process. Is that something we've considered?
So in my previous stint at DPW, this was an issue that was first coming up. The commercial zones that you're talking about were actually piloted in California. And to say the least, it was by the articles I read, some residents viewed it as a disaster.
Okay.
There was very competitive bidding, which resulted in residents seeing their, as Councilmember Henderson pointed out, in their line item on their tax bill, it went from several $100s to some people were seeing bills as high as $2,000. And the other problem that they ran into is that, and I don't think that they foresaw this, the smaller haulers, and we have a number of smaller haulers, were outbid by the big two, which would have been Waste Management and Republic. I know that I read information about the system that New York subsequently put in place where they put caps in each of the zones and then ultimately a ceiling on the number of zones that any large scale hauler could hold. So they couldn't gobble up half of this of Manhattan. You know, they could only hold like 3 in an area. If that was something that the city would to look at, we would definitely need to think about that, because it historically, based on what I've seen in other jurisdictions, it can have a drastic financial impact on our residents.
Sure. It seems like the New York model where multiple haulers per zone, as you mentioned, still allow for like a little more competitive pricing. I think they have like 3 to 5 per zone there.
I think that's right. Depends on the size.
Right, exactly. Well, lots to think about anyway. But I agree with the concern that we certainly don't want to see costs go up. Especially for residents, but I don't love that they're sort of zigzagging across the city and in and out of alleys so often, which is, having so much activity in the alleys is also not ideal. Okay, so with the removal of public litter containers, obviously we've talked about that a lot. Today, we've talked about it all year, really, in every hearing we've had. One of the things that I really want to get at over time is more of like a no wrong door for trash. And I know we're not there yet right now, but what do you think is the main reason that it actually matters where people put their trash and whether they're using litter cans for personal trash at this point?
So are you asking about the root cause then of why we're seeing what we're seeing?
Yeah, and also like, why does it matter? Yeah, like the why is, I know we have in our system, we have different ways you're allowed to dispose of your trash, but what's the why there? And like, maybe if you don't have the answer today, that's okay, but that's how I want us to be thinking about it.
I would know we collect differently, right? So if everybody's putting, their large bag and you're not going to be able to hold as much capacity.
Yep.
There's also a location issue, right? In terms of where they're at and where we're, attracting rodents if bags are left, on the side of those cans.
Yep.
And then also keep in mind, we keep that data separately, right? So we carefully track how much the tonnage of residential trash that's coming in, as opposed to from our public litter cans, how much tonnage is coming in. I'm not saying we couldn't work through that, but just some things
those are
to
reasons.
keep in mind.
Yeah. That helps.
I would also say from an operational standpoint, you're talking about two different types of collections. So yes, the volume is higher on residential collection, but the collection receptacles that those individuals, those employees are using, they have the assistance of a hydraulic lift. Whereas the folks that are lifting the litter cans, that's a plastic round liner that there's nothing on the back of our trucks that allows any assistance. So they are literally manhandling that can out of the bin, out of the receptacle to the back of the truck, and they have to lift it and dump it. So that's wear and tear on our employees too. It's something that we need to think of.
Yeah. And maybe the answer is as we change cans or technology, that it is less of a concern, right? But I'd love for us to just be thinking like that because, well, and then let me go a little further. So, the issue that everyone keeps raising about the need for the cans, of course, is litter.
Correct.
We heard from 3 different wards today, I think. And I know, Ward 1 is like, I think it's ground zero for little, maybe for some of litter. I think maybe some of the other ward council members would disagree, but how does DPW think about litter? Or is that something we need to be talking more about the Office of Clean City with? How does that play into the strategic planning you do?
It does. It plays into strategic thinking because it absolutely affects how we staff, what type of resources we need. As we change the nature of the infrastructure in the district, and one example I'll use is bike lanes. As we put bike lanes, as we need to do, it's an environmentally friendly way to get around the city, but it causes issues for DPW because whereas before we could have just run a large sized street sweeper quickly down the block, you now have a very skinny stretch of asphalt that's segregated from the street. And my folks can't clean that as quickly. And in some points I can't even, there aren't yet technologies or machines that can mechanically assist us. So it literally comes down to manpower. So what I used to be able to do in 5 minutes with a Pelican sweeper might take me an hour and a half with a crew of 15 folks with old school garden rakes and push brooms.
Is that because you don't have enough of the bike lane sweepers or do they not fit in every lane?
they don't always fit in every lane.
Okay.
So that's something that that's not to cast blame on DDOT at all. And I don't want my sister agency to take that. It's just conversations that.
No,
we
no,
need
it's something
and
we have
those
to
are some
solve
of the-
for.
So I think part of the problem is that as we change the layout and design of public space, it creates opportunities for refuse that would normally be picked up on a quick basis to aggregate in places we hadn't thought before, like the
Mhm.
little zebra bumps create like resistance. The trash doesn't move to where it used to move, or the public litter doesn't move to where it used to move. I also think that there's probably just been a change in attitude. My crews will tell you that I work side by side with them as many days of the week as I can. And what I notice is that especially onto our on ramps and off ramps of our public highways, 295 in particular, I can go out with a crew in 15 and we can spend an hour and a half cleaning just one segment. And by the next day, we've come back and the trash is there. And I'm still getting 2 to 3 emails from angry residents saying, you didn't clean it up when we actually did.
Yeah.
So I think it has, like you're saying, it has to be a multi-pronged approach. We need to continue to use our sweep to educate and talk to folks and residents and visitors coming through. But we also do need to look at different types of evolving technologies that can assist my folks and act as a force multiplier, because we can't be everywhere all at once.
Yeah, and I think the more we can look at technological solutions for some of this, is there any tech out there that can go after people who dump on highways from their vehicles? Do we have do cameras do that at all?
I'd have to look into that. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting if there were any other solutions like that. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know that they capture the image with sufficient detail for us to be able to pursue
Perhaps.
the operator of the vehicle.
Yeah.
One thing that I think we've gotten away from,
Mhm.
and I may be dating myself again, when I was young, we always heard about Smokey Bear and not smoking in the woods or making sure you put out your campfire. I grew up here in the city. There were no woods, there were no campfires, but I knew what to do if we were in a campfire, how to dispose of any lighted material. I think we need a very broad public education campaign regarding littering. There was one, again, when I was growing up, we talked about how bad litter was, but that went away.
I believe you're referring to Don't Be a Litter Bug.
Yes, don't be a litter bug.
Don't be a litter bug. And then where I grew up, there was a jingle, which I will now sing for you. If you see a piece of litter, pick it up, pick it up. These things stay with you,
They do.
right?
They do, and they actually guide your behavior, whether you know it or not. I'm sorry. They
It's
do
okay.
stay
You can
with
probably leave them all open because it's just me up here.
They do stay with you and they actually guide your behavior subconsciously, I believe.
I think so too. So we have an Office of the Clean City, which it turns out is also under my oversight. So we're going to start having them come do some things with us, I think. And, it occurs to me, well, maybe we should have invited them today to sit with you and talk about what they're doing as well, because this conversation really is so much about clean streets and litter. And how do you have the opportunity to work with them at all?
We do. In particular, our Office of Waste Diversion works closely with them and with DOE, who also plays a role in this as well.
Great. I know that there was at one point a grant from, I think it was the Alice Ferguson Foundation that did signs that we could put up about littering, and I found they actually helped. I know it seems like kind of like, oh, come on, if someone's littering, are they really going to care about a sign? But I put one on my front lawn, which at the time I was living on Kenyon, where people cruise by and by the hospital center and just throw trash out their window. And I swear to you, when I put that sign on my lawn, people stopped throwing it on my lawn. So I agree that more public education on that would be good. And perhaps we need to work with the Office of Clean City on that and see if those grants could still exist, because people loved those signs. We put them all over Ward 1. People would just pick them up. When we did office hours, we'd hand them out. I think it does make a difference. But that's why I was asking the question about the no wrong door, is just, and how we can use more tech. It's just people seem to not be getting more conscientious, and maybe just if they're visiting, don't care as much. because it's not their community. And we are lucky to have a lot of visitors in the District of Columbia. We just want to make sure that we can accommodate that and make sure our residents are not negatively impacted. Ms. Smith, you mentioned that you do very closely track that data between the different types of collection. Does that live anywhere? Is that public data? Is that stuff we can see, or is there a dashboard public can see?
I don't believe we have a public dashboard, but yes, we do track that data and we to provide updates.
Great.
You've
I
been
mean,
seeing
well,
it in your monthly reports, right?
yeah,
So,
yeah, okay. Is that in, is the tonnage is in there?
Right, yep.
Okay. And it's separated out. Okay.
Yeah.
All
But
right.
when we do recycling and trash, right, separated out and then
Yeah,
residential.
residential.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, now, the missing litter cans. How do you track that? How do you know when they've gone missing? Do you know when they've gone missing other than
don't
us?
always know when they've gone missing unless someone tells us. We would be able to track, and again, I'm gonna just speak for fiscal year 23 because we really ramped up how we were tracking that information. So we knew when we removed that can and had data around that for the DDOT request. We don't necessarily know if one of our cans goes missing right away. We would be able to track that when we go, like the deputy director said, to do that pickup on that route. We'd be able to track it that way, maybe if someone stole the can, which does happen. So we'd be able to track it that way. But if it's another agency's can, we can't necessarily, we're not necessarily notified that a bids can has gone missing or that a DGS can has gone missing.
Yeah, I'm less worried about those because I feel like they can. Well, first of all, the DGS cans we're going to know about eventually because somebody will tell us. But if a bid can is missing, they're going to know, right? Because they've got a clean team. I'm more concerned about all right, so 15th and V can went missing this year. I think it was probably road work because they had resurfaced the entire road for like 3 weeks. And then all of a sudden people were complaining that the can was gone. Are contractors not required to put the can back? I mean, what do they do with it during that project? Where did it go? And okay, so that's the first half. And the second half is the people on the collection route. Do they not notice the can's gone?
Right. So I was actually just talking with a staff member about the first part yesterday.
Okay.
So they are supposed to tell us if they move the can, because sometimes the construction team can move it themselves and sometimes they do.
Right.
not.
If it's not bolted, which I think is most of ours.
Right. So sometimes they do that. And sometimes they tell us, and then we will go and put it back when they say that their construction has concluded, and we've done that. However, sometimes they do not tell us when they've removed it in the first place. And sometimes if they do tell us they've removed it, they don't tell us when their construction process concludes. And so I do think that there's improvement that can be made around communication there, and we'll own part of that. But to your point, if they're not telling us that they've removed it and or that they've concluded their construction project, we wouldn't necessarily know.
Do we need to have a penalty for removing and not replacing a can on a project like that?
It's something we could certainly look into.
It makes me mad. And also, I mean, there's all sorts of speculation, like with this particular can, the residential building is accusing the church of having had it removed. And I was like, that's not really how it works. Like, you can't just make a phone call and the trash can goes away. Right. So we'd like to make sure we can reduce that drama. And, you already have a GIS map. So
Right.
at least you can, like, if one goes missing, you can consult the map and be like, well, that one's supposed to be there. I mean, at this point, I'm like, should we be air tagging them? Like,
We suggested this the other day, actually.
I got some raised eyebrows, but yes, I.
well, it'd
suggest-
be maybe a little too much data.
But as to your point about the employees noticing, that's on me. They work for me, so I own that. And that's an education piece. And Mr. Wright is here. He's my administrator. And
great.
it's a conversation that he and I will have that we need to reiterate to the crews. Like,
Yeah.
look, there's no penalty attached to this. This is so that the residents get their can back. If it was placed there persistent or pursuant to our procedure, you got to let us know so that we can either order it or pull it from inventory and
Right.
put it back.
Yeah. I mean, make them partners in this.
Correct.
Absolutely. And like, knowing if one's missing. I mean, obviously they know if it's missing because they're not collecting it, but if it's a construction project, they might be not be thinking, oh, I gotta remember when this is over to look for it. I'm sure if they see it, they'll empty it, but like the absence of it is not going to be a reminder, right?
Right.
So, okay, so good. So let's work on that. I think we're all trying to solve the same problem here. So I think we can get there. Okay. Do you think that the data you have on the litter can locations is reliable?
I think it's getting there. It's improving day by day.
Any modifications you have planned for the process based on this testimony or things you've observed so far?
Again, I think the process is sound. I think it's on us to ensure, in terms of accountability, that every single staff member is following the process as written. That's the next step for us.
Okay.
Right, is we have the process, we're doing it. As was pointed out, sometimes there's miscommunication. And so that's on our end to make sure that we're holding people accountable to following the process that is now put in place. And a lot of people, have not been doing this process for a long time. So this is new. So it's just us reiterating to folks who have been at DPW for a really long time. This is now the process that we have to follow.
Okay. So with the request for installation. All right. So you heard me say to the commissioners, some of this was 2022 data, but I think we're hearing it still. And some of it was also 23. The response that residential that we don't put in here. I heard you talk about that a little bit. Specifically in situations where there was a can and it was removed in a residential area, we want them back. And that in Ward 1 in particular is just like the residential areas just get so slammed by this litter. So I know we've been back and forth a little bit on our list of cans, but like, I'd really like to wrap that up by the end of the year and make sure we get all those cans back now that you've got the inventory. Because before 2/3 of your time, we made a list and it just didn't go anywhere. So I think, especially as chair of the committee, like to be able to get that done for my people. The can not needed. How does somebody come to that determination? So what are the inputs?
So on that note, and I'll preface by saying that we are already working with OUC on the 311 system.
Thank you for that. And we know that's really tough and that you're making progress. So I appreciate it.
So that residents are aware, it's a good system. It's not perfect.
Yeah.
And with any technology, there are limitations. And my understanding is that when staff go in and they are closing out service requests, they're choosing from a drop-down menu. Mrs. Smith and I can't tell you when the last time that the DPW drop-downs were looked at to make sure that they accurately reflect what our folks are doing on the ground. But more importantly, and beyond that, even if there is a limitation, in our short tenures, what we have been reiterating with the folks underneath us who are either handling requests or doing the operations themselves is that when you close out a service request, we expect you to put in information. And what type of information am I talking about? So for a perfect example is I've been working closely with our escalations teams. They're typically the folks that go out like where if something has been just pending, and it finally gets flagged, for whatever reason, it was stuck in 311 and we go handle it. When it's closed, every crew is to take before pictures. So when they get there of what the situation is and after pictures to show that the work has actually been done. And if they don't enter those photographs into the 311 request, we have folks that have been trained now to go into Salesforce and actually put the photographs in and a written explanation in the note box if there's not something in the drop down that captures why we did what we did.
Okay.
So we can't speak to why that wasn't occurring before. I think it was partially a limitation of the system, but our folks do have the option in Salesforce to put in notes and they are expected to do so.
Okay. So what is your understanding of how they make the determination of a can not being needed?
They go out and it's the criteria, it's either,
A business,
Business,
a bus
bus
stop,
stop.
and how close the nearest can is.
correct.
So if there's already a can, for example, in that block,
Mhm.
they're likely not going to request another one.
And why? Why can't we have another can on the same block?
I think it goes back to, it's not necessarily that we can't, but it's looking holistically at our process
Mhm.
for the number of cans we manage
Mhm.
and what impact that has to operations to
Mhm.
have, again, we have nearly 7,000 cans now. Okay, if we have 10,000, we're not going to service them as frequently given our current staffing numbers. And so just instead of just going and adding a bunch of new cans that don't fit the criteria we set, if we want to have a holistic conversation around opening that up, looking big picture at the impact that that has to operations.
Okay. And I know you don't have an historic list of cans, so when we go back and say we'd like a can put back in a residential area where there was one, I know we'll have to specify for you it was there so that it doesn't just get closed out as residential, but we're going to be
And
doing
we
this
have some,
manually. I
But
think.
I would say it's
Yeah.
100% accurate.
As much specificity that could be provided would be helpful.
Yeah, of course, we have it. One thing that was particularly soul crushing was I had gone and I realized I could just buy the blue recycling cans where I have clean teams. Because I know that you can't service those on commercial corridors, but a clean team can. And so somewhere after we installed our blue cans, a bunch of the brown ones got taken that were just side by side.
Mm.
And so what it means is that those blue cans have just become the trash can, and that's obviously not what we want. I mean, we've talked a lot about waste diversion today, so I don't have to. Okay. So hold on a second. Let's see. What's your plan for determining where the 200 new cans are going?
So we have 118 open requests right now for installs that we're going through. The sweep team is going through and doing those assessments right now. We're
Great.
prioritizing replacements up for safety reasons. If a can is bent, it's sticking out. You've seen them like where the door's not closing properly and it's partly in the sidewalk. So our priority is the safety replacements. And then again, just going through that list of 118 that we have open right now. And that's 118 is just for installs, by the way, not
Okay.
for removal or repairs.
Okay. Can we typically repair a can rather than replacing it? I guess it depends.
It depends on what happened to the can.
I mean, I feel like the people that repair the residential cans are freaking MacGyvers. It's like, I don't know how they do it. But you can tell them I said that. Okay. The public litter can data set that's online at Open Data says that it was last updated on January 10th, 2022. Do you think that's accurate?
I will have to double check that. I'm
Okay.
not sure.
To get that updated, either way, either to get that sentence updated or the data updated, whichever.
We have a chief performance officer now, very exciting.
Yeah.
So we're excited to be able to move forward, not only with having accurate data internally, but being able to provide more transparency to you and the public.
Thank you. So when an ANC requests a can and DPW determines that it's not needed, and then the ANC sends a formal response, is that something that gets logged, tracked, kept anywhere?
We do keep that letter in 311 in our Salesforce portal. And we do discuss it with the team, because if we say a can is not needed and the ANC says, we do recommend that you place a can, we don't just keep it on file to say that there was a disagreement. Again, we have to give that ANC great weight. So the team goes back and reviews. I know I've been a part of a few calls with ANCs where we'll just jump on the phone and say, okay, let's talk more about this. Sometimes it goes through email, but we're going to talk about it if we're both not on the same page. before we make that final determination and close it out in 311.
Great. How often is the ANC in agreement with an agency's recommendation on placement or removal?
I do not have that data. I'd have to actually.
It'd be
look at
interesting
our
to know.
Salesforce data to see.
Okay. I think we're good on that bill. Unless you have anything you want to add. We'll do the last bill. Good. No, please, God.
Good.
Nothing more.
We have a process. We're working to be better. That's the summary there.
Okay. All right. I have two more questions for you and then Councilmember Henderson gave me some homework here. Okay, so the Litter Control Amendment Act. Does DPW have a sense of how many fewer OAH case dismissals will occur as a result of this legislation?
It's hard to state how many fewer. Well, we wouldn't have any, because if it's certified mail and we've got the correct address, mailing address, if it's not certified mail and we have the correct mailing address, after 5 days, it's deemed served.
Okay.
So then we can prove service if we have, and that's the big if we provided the correct mailing address and mailed it to that address. So that would not be the basis for any dismissal.
And the correct mailing address, you're looking at both the service address and the like the tax records or.
Absolutely. We get the information from the tax records.
Okay. How many more cases will DPW be able to file with OAH in the first place?
Oh, substantially. Right now, we're writing the tickets, but we're not actually able to file the tickets because we don't have proof of service, which is the green card, which is required. Oftentimes, the respondent will file the case at OAH, meaning they receive it, even though we haven't gotten the green card back. And oftentimes that's just a function of the Postal Service not returning the green card or even retrieving the green card from the mail. The respondent will go and file the case. And if DPW is giving substantial notice, we can prove service by conspicuously posting and then moving forward. But if we don't have sufficient notice, then the respondent has filed the case. We have not been able to provide the requisite documentation and the case is dismissed. So we will be leveling the playing field so that the respondent no longer needs to be the one to initiate the case. DPW will initiate the case in all respects.
Any ballpark figure there on how many cases?
It's more, much more than 100. Last year we filed 19,000 cases. The percentage, I'd say at least about 30% of the cases we're having this issue.
Okay. Councilmember Henderson said there is a dead deer in front of Plummer Elementary School. Multiple people have called it in and it's still there. And she believes DPW is the responding agency.
What a coincidence that we're here.
What a
We
coincidence.
will take care of that
Thank you.
Today.
Today.
Yes.
Right now.
Venison for everyone. Okay. One last thing. There was a press conference at 11:30 about leaf season, and apparently there was a demonstration of the claw, which makes me super mad that we had to miss it. But
Would you like to see the claw?
I would love to see the claw. The director demonstrated with his hands for me on Monday, but I would like to see the claw because it allows us to pick up wet leaves better and saves time for the staff so they don't have to hand rake.
Have your office send me some available dates.
Fantastic. I'm going to be out there. We'll tell the mayor it was very rude that she did this without all of us. Excuse me. And this concludes today's public hearing. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And for those who have not yet submitted written testimony, please do so by submitting it on the council's hearing management system at lims.dc.gov. The record for this hearing will close at 5 p.m. on Thursday, November 1st, 2023. The time is now 11:59 a.m. and this hearing is adjourned.